everybody, good morning and welcome back to my channel and my kitchen. This morning I am going to be making something for you guys. This is a Trini specialty. It's fry bake, and I'm also going to be doing tomato choka. This is basically the way I was taught to do it. So it's not like a specific recipe or anything. This is just how I was taught. I'm going to use measurements for you guys, even though I don't use measurements when I'm cooking. I'm going to use measurements for you guys just so that you can have something to follow if you're new to making fry bake and you just want to try it. So I'm only going to be making it for myself, so it's not going to be like a recipe that yields a lot. It's just going to be, a one-person thing. You're still going to get a good amount of fry bake, but let's get into it. Okay, so here I have some all-purpose flour. This is probably about a cup and a smidge. A cup and a smidge, and that's only because the cup to me looked a little bit. I have a tablespoon of baking powder. Here I have a teaspoon of instant yeast. Whoops. This is the yeast that I'm using. It's active dry yeast. Active dry yeast. This is the one I'm using. I have some butter here. This is literally like this is a tablespoon and a half of butter, and this is just a half of a teaspoon of salt in this container here, and I have some warm water in this measuring cup. Is about a cup and a half of warm water in here. So what I'm gonna first do is I'm gonna add the yeast to the warm water just so that it can start to ferment. Just give that a quick stir. Most people add all the dry ingredients into the flour first, but this is the way I do it. So this tends to work for me, so this is what I'm doing. Then I am going to add the butter into the flour. I'm just gonna work this around with the fork. I'm not going to use my hands to knead this because I have on acrylics and I don't want to. So I'm just going to use the fork. It's no different if you use your hands or a fork. It's just I'm familiar with using utensils to knead flour. So if you're comfortable using your hands, then go ahead and do so. So that's that. And I'm going to add the baking powder. Again, this is a tablespoon of baking powder. It may seem a lot, but it's not. Add it in there. And I'm going to add the salt, just a pinch of salt. Well, half a teaspoon of salt. Just mix it all in there. So this is the baking powder I used. All these were both bought in Target. You can use any yeast or any baking powder you choose, wherever you get them from. That's totally fine. Okay, so I have all the dry ingredients mixed in this bowl, which is fine. So I'm just gonna set this aside over here, and I'm gonna move this out my way. Probably gonna catch some heat for this. Hopefully I don't, but this is just my way of doing it. I have some granulated sugar here, and I'm gonna add my granulated sugar into my yeast and warm water. It's just gonna be about 2 tablespoons. No judgments, guys, please. All my Trinis, if you've never done this, no judgments. If you have, then you know why I'm doing it. It gives the fry bake a nicer taste to me. It's a nice sweet taste. Other than that, the flour, the water, the yeast, the baking powder, and the butter just makes it a little bland, and I don't like bland. So adding just a little, 2 tablespoons of sugar kind of brightens it up and makes it taste a little better. Does nothing to the fry bake. It doesn't change the texture or anything of the sort. It just gives it a nicer taste, personally for me. Okay, so I may not use all of this, which is fine because again, this is just a one-person mix. And I'm gonna throw it in there and just mix it with the fork. Till it all slightly comes together. Okay, so when you're mixing this, you don't want the dough to be too stiff. It needs to be like soft and a little pillowy, not stiff at all. So there it is. This is what my dough looks like. I'm gonna cover this with plastic wrap and I'll get started on the tomato choka. I already have half of an onion and 3 cloves of garlic cut up, and the tomatoes currently in the broiler. I'm just basically charring it just so that it can be like nice and roasted, and then I'll get started on that. Okay, so I'm just gonna cover this with some plastic wrap. My kitchen is actually really warm right now because even though I'm in New York and in the cold, I have my heat on, and again, the tomatoes in the broiler, so the oven is on, which is literally right there. So it's keeping it nice and warm, which is good because this does need to sit and rise in a warm area. So if you want, or you prefer extra heat, you can always cover it with a kitchen towel, just to keep the heat in there, but it's not necessary. I mean, if you have a cold kitchen, or you just want to drive some heat into it, you can cover it with a kitchen towel, and that's that. So I'm going to set this aside, let this rise for about 20 to 30 minutes, or until it kind of doubles in size, and I will get the tomato out of the oven. It should be done out of the broiler. It should be done by now. I'm not sure. I haven't checked it. So I'm going to get it out, see what it looks like, and I'll be back. Okay, so I took the tomatoes out. This is what they look like. And I'm just going to cut it up into like small pieces. I did let this cool for a bit because it was extremely hot when I took it out, so I let it cool for a bit. And I didn't take any of the charred pieces off because I kind of want those charred pieces. Now that the tomatoes is out and cut up and set aside, I can work on the dough. I did go in before I came back to you guys, and I sort of kind of kneaded it together. And yes, I did use my hands, even though I said I wasn't going to. So this is what it is. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to break pieces of it off. I just dusted my hands with a little bit of flour. I'm going to break this up, this amount of dough, into like 3 pieces, into 3 tiny balls. And there you have it, the 3 balls. And I'm going to cover this down again with a kitchen towel. And let it sit for probably another 10 minutes, not too long. And then I will start to fry it for, now I'm gonna put on the oil to fry it, and I'm also gonna put the tomato choka on the fire as well. Basically what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put on a pan with some oil, and I'm gonna saute the garlic and the onions first for about a minute or two. Then I'll add the tomatoes, and I'll basically let that sit on a really low fire for about 5 minutes, roughly 5 minutes, or until it reaches a consistency that I like. Usually people just saute the garlic and the onion, and then, you know, throw that over into the tomato and just mix it up. I've seen it done that way, but I'm doing it this way because this is basically how I grew up on it. So this is what I'm gonna do. So I'm gonna clean off my hands, clean down the kitchen, the countertop, put on the oil to fry the bake, and then I'm gonna put this on the fire. Okay, so now I have both pans on the fire. One for the tomato choka, the next for the fry bake. I'm going to show you guys how I do it. So I'm going to just put this, I just have a piece of plastic wrap on the countertop. So I'm just going to set these to a side. Flatten it a little bit with my hands. So this is how I'm going to fry it. So I flattened it a bit with my hands, and then I'm just rolling it out a little bit with the rolling pin, not too thin. Basically what I'm gonna do is I'm going to cut it into like odd shapes. Make this into 3. Now this is only because as a breakfast food, I don't like the fry bake to be too big or thick. And I've learned this particular process from my mother-in-law. This is how she usually does hers, to make it nice and thin and small. So I basically adapted her process. So this is how it's gonna look when it's frying. I'm gonna do one more. Before I actually start the frying process. Just makes it nice and small and cute. Okay, so I have both pans on the fire. This may spill up a bit because the tomato dripped off into the onions. I'm just gonna let that sit, you know, just saute for about a minute or 2 by itself. I have my calendar here that I'm going to put the bacon when I'm done. I'm just gonna put a piece of paper towel on the inside. Press the oil. And let's go. Automatically it floats up to the top. I'm just using this spoon to throw some oil on the top of it, and then I'll flip it. Next one. Wait for it to float up. Use the spoon, just throw some oil to the top for it to puff up real nice. And then flip. And flip over the first one again. Because they're thin, it doesn't take that long to fry at all. That's why I did it so thin and so small. Alright, so now I'm going to add the tomatoes into the garlic and the onion. Perfect fry bake. I'm going to reduce the heat on the tomatoes. Right now it's really high, so I'm gonna, turn it down to low. Well, medium heat. And I'll fry out the rest of the bake. Okay, so the last two, just getting that out now. have it. Fry bake. And the tomato choka is just about ready. I'm just gonna season it with some salt and black pepper, and I'll plate everything up for you guys to show you guys what it looks like. Okay, so here it is all finished. Fry bake and tomato choka. All done, ready to be enjoyed.